You get the information you need in terms you can understand and act upon. This is the Yohanan podcast.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of Yohanan podcast, second interview. If you missed the first interview with my barber, L, check that out for sure on any platform. And this interview is with Chris Keody of Your Exit COO. So that is exactly what it sounds like. Chris is basically providing consulting work for people who have an aim of exiting. So Chris sort of caught my attention because I deal with a lot of people as well, clients of mine and potential clients who are pretty focused on how they're going to exit, even if it's at a pretty early stage in their business where they're not even close to exiting necessarily. So me as a lawyer, I only provide like a limited, set of tools for that. Like I can make sure the legal stuff is in order, but I think that most of what goes into that is really on the operations side across many different work streams. So I definitely, do push clients to try to seek out business consultants who understand how to exit the right way and how to really maximize that. So that's what Chris does. And, I just want to start by asking Chris, like, how did you get into this line of work and what are your own experiences, owning companies, exiting well, exiting not well, etc.
Yeah, I would say it was a long journey to get here. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, went to high school on the east of Boston, went back to LA for college because I just couldn't stand the extreme temperature difference from winter to summer, right? And I went, funny thing is I went to film school. I just kind of fell into it. Film was just something that I've always loved and had a liking to since I was a kid. I remember watching films with my parents, either in theater or when Blockbuster was a thing, right? We'd go and rent movies. But the thing that always struck me about film was not the production side of it. It wasn't making the films that I found interesting. It was taking a form of artistic expression and then making it make money. That was always fascinating to me. And so that kind of got me into learning more about business and the business side of film, how films are financed and how investment in a film product works. And that wasn't anything like even though I went to a film school, Cal State Long Beach, which Quentin Tarantino famously dropped out from. They weren't teaching that kind of stuff. They were just teaching cinematography, lighting class, right? That kind of stuff. And I felt like there was just something missing that I couldn't connect with. And I kind of set off on my own with a few buddies of mine. And we started a film production company when we were in college, kind of the typical story, right? Typical film student story. And we did some commercials and music videos, really, really small time. But the great part about this is because we didn't have a strong understanding in business, we didn't time the market right. And so at the time that we were pursuing these projects, it was right around the time of the global financial crisis. So a ton of finance was drying up, right? People just were risk averse. They didn't want to put money into a project that they just weren't sure it was going to make, have an ROI or not, right? So we kind of lost momentum because of it. And we parted ways. We kind of just said, you know what, we're not gonna do the struggling artist thing. We need to go get a real job. That led me to my first role in a business where I started learning professional skills. And this was in the restaurant industry. I got hired at a restaurant. I started out as a line chef essentially, and then quickly became promoted to be a corporate manager in the business. And this was a Japanese company expanding into the US. So when I was hired at the second restaurant location they ever opened. In the United States. And from there, I was just sort of thrown into the fire and put in charge of opening all the other restaurant locations. So I got to learn every step of that industry, from, filing for permits, working with the general contractors and the architects, and the engineers, building out the restaurant. I was in charge of managing the projects too. And then when we opened the restaurant, I would hire and train the staff, and then I would run the restaurant. And I was opening a new restaurant every 3 months. So in 2 years, I opened 7 restaurant locations, and it was really intense. I consider it a master's course in business, now that I look back at that time. And as you can imagine, I worked in that company for 2.5 years. I decided, you know what? I'm going to take my skills and go start my own business. I think I have enough of a foundation and knowledge on how to run a business, how to scale it, that I can go do my own thing. So I got together with a buddy of mine, and we started a cannabis delivery service in Los Angeles. And the unique thing about the cannabis delivery service was shops, right? They didn't have a level of professionalism that I thought the industry needed. It was just sort of jeans into somebody's door with a backpack. And I thought that was really unapproachable. I just looked at that and said, there's got to be a better way to do this. So my partner and I decided to focus on the experience, making it professional. And we focused on high profile and celebrity clients. We made sure that the appearance of the business itself was palatable for the client base. And what I mean by that is we had all of our drivers dress up in suits. We delivered in a nice little gift bag. It was very discreet. It's pretty unassuming, right? And I got so many stories, but I can't tell you how many times I was mistaken for a lawyer. And they're like, "Are you looking for a law office?" I'm like, no. I know where I need to be, Anyway, that's a story for another day. But getting into this industry was exciting for me, because at the time that medical was legal, but not recreational cannabis, right? And so I had a vision for where the industry was headed. I knew that recreational cannabis was going to be legal, and this was before any state had legalized officially, right? And so I just knew that it was heading in that direction. And there were quite a few players in the industry at the time who were also looking to elevate the experience the way that we were looking to. Most of them were on the retail side, through how they sold it, and then also product packaging. There was a brand of edible chocolate, looks like Godiva, right? But cannabis infused. And so we saw the indicators that the industry was heading in this direction. So that allowed us to kind of double down on the strategy of, hey, let's go after this market. Let's really try to help the industry elevate the status of how the product is and how it's being transacted. And we ran that business for about 4 years. I'm not a consumer, so after 4 years, I was starting to grow dispassionate about some of the landscape in the industry. And by the time I was ready to exit that company and that business, there were just so many different things going on the legislative side that I decided, you know what, I don't want to be stuck running a business that's dealing with a ton of legal issues, right? And so my partner and I both agreed it was time to exit. And so we sold the company to a private buyer. And the lesson I took from that was we didn't have anybody help us. The joke I like to tell people, which is kind of really a half joke, half truth, is because we were huge fans of Shark Tank and we watched Shark Tank religiously, we knew what we were doing when it came time to exit, right? And so we're like, oh yeah, valuation, like we just throw together numbers, right? We didn't do anything in terms of the things that you're supposed to do. Go out and get a quality of earnings, right? Get due diligence done, all that kind of stuff. Essentially audit the business. We didn't do any of that. We just sort of sat in front of the buyer and traded pieces of paper. We gave him ownership. He gave us a check, and that was pretty much it, right? And walking away from that experience, I felt like I wish I could have done more. But when that happens, you can't go back, right? You can't undo it. You can't go back and say, wait, hold on. I know I signed the papers over to you, but can you give it back to me? I'll give you the check back. So I just had to walk away. But at the same time, because I was dispassionate, there was quite a bit of relief I was experiencing. I was relieved that I was kind of letting go of that thing that I had built, that I was sort of not too excited about anymore. So from there, I kind of decided to jump into a few ventures, and I had a few false starts, trying to start up a consulting firm and then a creative agency, and partnered with some folks on a digital marketing agency. That wasn't anything I had experience in. So because I didn't have any knowledge in marketing, I wasn't really adding a ton of value to the partnership. At that point, I said, let me go find some other opportunities. And long story short, my wife and I decided to move to Seattle, just to kind of get out of the sphere of Los Angeles, look for a fresh start, not only in business but in life. And so we moved out here, and I bounced around a little bit. I worked with a retired attorney for a little bit, litigating a case. I ran a hotel for a couple of years. And then just before COVID, I decided, you know what, I need to get out on my own, and I need to help other business owners with the expertise that I had. I have all this experience in business. I have a wide range of experience in different industries too. I'd love to be able to share that with other business owners, for their benefit, right? And so I kind of went down this path of restarting consulting. And at first I thought, let me just help people with the knowledge that I have. It was kind of aimless. And what I like to say is I was consulting for consulting's sake. I had all this knowledge. I had this experience. I wanted to share it with others. But there wasn't really a purpose. There wasn't an intention behind it, right? So I got a few clients and helped them sort of organize or structure their businesses. And then I ended up working with an accounting firm who really needed some operational help. So I came in and added some structure to the business. And the owner was planning for their transition. So what they really wanted was somebody to come in and affect the business from an operations perspective so that the owner could exit. And partway through this engagement, I realized, they're not the only owner that's going through these challenges. Other business owners have similar challenges, and there's also there's not just the business side of it. There's the mental, emotional side too, right? There's the idea of letting some aspects of the business go, and giving up some accountability or ownership over certain areas of the business. Those are difficult things to do when you've been the sole owner for 20, 30, 40 years, right? So when that engagement ended, I decided, you know what, I'm gonna pivot my practice and focus specifically on the exit piece. Because for me, because I was aimless at the time, I figured out, because I've been through an exit, I know what that's like, and I know what it's like to walk away from a business that you didn't really exit successfully in hindsight, right? I don't want to say it was a failure, but I did learn quite a bit, and I did make a ton of mistakes. So let me go help other business owners avoid those. That kind of leads me to where I am now, where I help business owners find ways to add more value to their company before they exit. And it's not something that is talked about too often, because most people just say, okay, I've got a business that's making money. Let me just go sell it. Well, once you go to the business broker or the investment banker, you'll soon learn that it's not that simple. You can't just go sell it like you can sell a car or a house, right? There's going to be some things that you have to do in the business to create more value and make it a valuable performing asset for a potential buyer. And so that's largely the work that I focus on, is coming in, putting in a foundation for the business to run on its own, and operate efficiently, and make it look more attractive to a potential buyer. Anyway, but that's the short version of my journey.
Thank you, Chris. So my next question is, how can other business owners ensure that they have a successful exit? Specifically, what do they need to do to prepare the company itself operationally and financially and otherwise to make sure that they don't end up regretting the decision to sell or regretting the way that they went about the decision to sell?
There's an on paper aspect of this question, and then there's an intangible aspect of the question, right? The on paper is one thing I tell my clients now is if you are selling your business, make sure it's a life-changing amount of money. In other words, it has to be able to either sustain you for the next chapter of your life financially, or it's gonna, get you out of financial distress, right? Which, believe it or not, many business owners are experiencing. And so when you sell your business, make sure that the amount of money that you're selling the business for is going to affect your life in a positive way. That's not something I did. I just sort of, my partner and I we got an offer. We didn't really negotiate. We just said, okay, great. You're going to buy the company for that amount. Fine. And, because we were 50-50, we just split it in half. And it didn't really allow me to, amount of money that we sold the business for did not affect my life positively from a financial perspective. And that's one thing that I wish I could change, because there were so many factors leading up to that. It's not just you didn't negotiate, right? But what did we do to prepare the company before we sold it? Which the answer was not much, right? We didn't really do much. We put together very, very, very basic things, basic financials. And then the other big mistake I made was the on paper mistake was I didn't engage help from somebody who knew what they were doing. Somebody that could come in and say, hey, you want to sell your business in X amount of time? Here's a roadmap. Here's a step-by-step of things that you should start preparing before you get to the sale. I think most people look at selling their business like, I'm just going to sell it. Like, that's it. I'm going to go have a conversation with somebody, a broker or whoever, and they're going to help me sell it. They're going to put it on the market, and then maybe I'll go back and forth with the buyer for a little bit. But that's pretty much how you do it, right? But what most people don't realize is there's a process. Every business goes through the same process for the transaction. But the thing that's different between each business is all the nuances. Every owner is different. Every business is different. And by the time the business gets to the transaction process, a lot of those nuances have to be navigated through, right? Because you're taking this thing that's essentially unique. You take a business that's unique, and then you're trying to fit it into this process that is standardized in the industry, in selling a business. So there's certain things that you have to do to make the business fit those boxes. There's financial, there's legal, right? And there's operational too. Those things I wasn't aware of whatsoever. I just thought, we have a business, it's making money, let's just go sell it. The other thing that we didn't do was we didn't entertain multiple offers. We had worked with somebody who expressed interest in taking ownership of the business. I would say about a year or two before we actually sold it. They just came to us and said, hey, they were a vendor actually. And they said, if you ever need somebody to take this business off your hands, let me know. I'd be interested. And so we continued to work with them as a vendor. And then when my partner and I were ready to exit the business, we just thought, okay, that person expressed interest. Let's just go to that person. We didn't think about, hey, let's go see what other people would pay us for it. Right. And then also look at all the different options. Maybe we didn't have to give up all of our equity. Maybe there was a different structure. Right. Anyway, but those are so many pieces and elements to it that we weren't privy to. The intangible aspects of it I made mistakes with were not talking to my wife about it. That's something that can affect the family dynamic, because you are building this business, it's generating income for your family, and then what happens when that income is gone, right? And then also like I mentioned, the amount of money that we sold the business for wasn't life changing. So it wasn't like all of a sudden we sold this business and then now, we went and bought, $1 million+ home, and I have a Ferrari and all those, the material things. None of that happened. And experiencing some regret after what was challenging, because I couldn't talk to anybody about it. I was embarrassed because going through it and not having done the appropriate things to sell it for a good amount of money was not something that I wanted to admit to. And it took me a while to get over that. It's something that I kind of loosely phrase as post-exit regret. There's some aspects of it that, man, I wish I did this differently. I wish I did that differently. And that's the mental, emotional aspect that I found challenging to get through, without having anybody to help me, right? I didn't seek therapy. I didn't have a mentor at the time who could help me navigate that. So those were the both tangible and intangible aspects.
So we know that one of the biggest challenges when you're trying to sell a business is the business's dependency on the owners. And this is especially a concern for small to medium-sized businesses because the owners are capable of playing such a big role. So given your experience, how important is it for business owners to develop systems that allow the business to operate independently of their direct involvement? It sounds like this could not only facilitate a smoother sale, but also make succession planning much easier in general. So what steps would you recommend to business owners who want to reduce their day-to-day role in the business?
The biggest thing for small to medium-sized businesses is something you'll hear called owner dependency. And there's a lot of things that lead up to it. But essentially, if the owner is a large part of the day-to-day operations of the business, that creates a little bit of a challenge, because for the business being sold or being transferred, right, in terms of ownership. I mean, we talk about selling a business quite a bit, but succession is also something that I see too. An owner handing the business over to somebody else, right? Most business owners, because they've built the business from the ground up, because they've been involved in the day-to-day since day one, it's hard to look at the business from the perspective of, what if I'm not the one running things? What if I'm just owning it? Some of the things that help a business get sold are, things I like to talk about are processes, right? People talk about this. This is the boring side of business. That's what I like to say. As I've come up in my career, I tell people that, I have a background in business operations, and most people say, what does that mean? Because it's such a nebulous term. For me, something I say is systems and processes are my love language. Right. So when you think about administering passwords to your team, right, like login access, right. This is a real conversation I had with a client last week. I was like, the way we do it for 4 people should be the same way we do it for 40 people. Right. And the remark I got from that was, wow, I didn't even think of it like that. Right. I'm really glad that, Chris, you're thinking of it that way, because I was just trying to give them the logins. Right. And when you're a business owner, you're just trying to get stuff done. You're not thinking about, how can we do this in the most efficient and effective way to reach our goals in the long term. If you're planning to grow your business, you can't run your business the same way you do now, just by putting out the fires every day, right? As you would when it's double the size, triple the size, 10x the size, right? Because your problems, your fires that you're putting out, they're going to increase exponentially the more your business. And where owners get stuck is they get stuck in this position where they're making all the decisions. And when you take your business to go get sold and there's a buyer that says, hey, I think your business is attractive, but I don't want to be the one having to make all these decisions. I don't want to be the one answering client calls. I don't want to do scheduling, right? I just want to own a performing asset. And then I want to be able to kind of dip my toe in it where I see fit, where my skills will add the most value. Most business owners don't think about running their business that way. And so the main thing that I see is owner dependency as a hindrance to the owner's exit. When a business owner takes their business to a broker or a banker and they say, hey, I want to sell, and then they're starting to go through, okay, how does your business run, blah blah blah. And if all the answers tie back to the owner, then immediately it becomes way less attractive. Right. And in most cases, it will be deemed unsellable. You can't sell your business because you're not selling a business, you're selling a job. Right. And a buyer is not going to want to buy their way into a job. The most prevalent issue with small businesses, and that's kind of what I focus on, is small business owners. Anybody doing $10 million in revenue or under. I have a client doing revenue. They closed just under $250,000 last year, right? They have some things about the business, the on paper aspects of the business are valuable. They have intellectual property, right? They have industry reputation, industry knowledge. Those things are valuable, but the problem is when you have something of value, but you don't have a business that can operate on its own, you don't have a mechanism for the business to operate on its own, then it becomes way less valuable. And so even though intellectual property and brand reputation, there can be value assigned to those things, it's like having a house with, the kitchen looks really nice, but the rest of the house is just a mess. It's dated, it's old flooring, but the kitchen, shaker cabinets, quartz countertop, and you've got one piece of the house that looks really good, and then the rest of the house is like from the 1960s or 70s, devalues the property, right? And it's the same in business. I look at it the same way because there's so many parallels here. You're building an asset. So what I say to my clients is you should be operating the business so that it's ready for you to exit at any moment, right? And look, it takes time. It takes time to do that. But that should be the short-term focus is, hey, let's make sure that the business is ready. So what if something happens? What if I get sick? What if my kid has a kid? I'm having a grandchild and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I want to go live near my kid because I want to be in my grandchild's life, right? You don't have the freedom and flexibility to do those things when you're stuck in the business. And this is even harder if your business is a local business where you're serving a local community, right? If you have a remote business, sure, maybe you can kind of, up and move and still operate remotely, right? But, most of the time a business is operating, that the business that's operating locally, the owner is just stuck in it. So owners got to get out of it. That's the biggest thing.
So we know there's a huge importance to writing things down and developing systems beyond just what's in the heads of the founders. And I think for a lot of small businesses, there's so many different things going on, and there are so few things that are actually written down. The first question that people have is, where do I begin when it comes to the standard operating procedures? What's the thing to tackle first? So from your perspective, if you have a firm that you're working with that wants to sell the business in the near future, what's the first thing that they need to clarify and get written down and get really clear on before they get deeper into the process?
Specifically, what I focus on, I start with what I call core value, right? What's the core value of the business? What's the core value proposition? What are you delivering to your customers or your clients? Right? There has to be a systems and processes in place to do those things consistently, repeatedly, right? So you take the example I like to use that's relevant and easy to understand is a restaurant, okay? Here in Seattle, they're like literally across the street from each other, right? So because you have this level of competition, what makes one Indian restaurant more attractive as a business asset than the other, right? You've got to figure out what's the core thing that you do really well. Maybe one has really good rice, maybe one has really good curry. whatever that is, though the systems and the processes for what I call the core value, those have to be documented, right? And in a restaurant's case, it's the recipes, and it's also where and how they source the products, right? And so the recipe, one restaurant might have a really good family secret curry recipe, right? You've got to get that down on paper, and it has to be in a format that you can just hand to somebody, right? So many owners, we have it, we have a recipe. Okay, where is it? It's right here. I know it. Like, okay, but if you're not here, how can somebody still make the food the same way you would make it, right? And all of that has to get put down on paper. And nowadays, because and stuff, and also technology is the thing, right? Put it in a Word doc or put it in a Google doc and store it, on a cloud storage, some file storage, right? That's a way to document the systems and processes. And so I start with the core value of the business. What's the thing that you're delivering to customers or clients? That's the thing that needs to be documented first. That's the most critical thing, because that's the thing that's actually generating value in the business, right? It's helping the business make money. From there, I go to how do we sell, right? Do we sell it in the restaurant? Do we sell it, by through delivery? Do we do takeout only? Do we do sit down? Blah blah blah. Okay, if we do takeout, what's the process for takeout? What's the process for sit down? How do we serve the food when people come in and sit down in the restaurant? Those are things that need to be documented as well. And then how do we get people in the door? How do we get customers to come in and come eat our food, right? Maybe we have a sign outside. Maybe we post ads on social media, or, we're always on a billboard on whatever street, right? That has to be documented too. Where do we get the signs from? Or how do we make the social media ads? All of those needs processes. Essentially, I boil it down to 6 areas, right? Sales, marketing, finance, operations, HR, and then leadership, right? And I can dive deeper into those, but essentially those are the 6 areas that I've identified that add the most value in a business, because you can build a business in the most, you can build up a business to be a really complex machine, but if you don't have those 6 areas nailed down, it doesn't matter how complex the business is. The business is, if you transfer the business to somebody else, there's huge potential that it's going to fall apart, because a new buyer that comes in, if they don't have systems and mechanisms for those each of those 6 areas to function on their own, then they're going to have to either bring somebody in to come and help them make sense of it and try to run this thing as best as they possibly can without the previous owner, right? Which, there's some stories out there of that not going so well, right? Or the other option is the previous owner has to come back, and they have to say, hey, can you just come on for another couple of years? Can you teach me, the new owner, how you made the curry? Can you teach me how you advertised on social media? The owner doesn't get to experience the freedom of having sold their business or having exited their business if they're constantly having to continue doing stuff in the day-to-day, right? And so those are the areas I focus on the most, because when they get to the transaction, if you as a business owner can say, hey, the playbook on how the business is run, here you go. And then a new owner comes in, the buyer comes in, they look at it and they say, oh, wow, I understand this. Everything's here. All I have to do is just let it run. And if I want to grow it, and I'm really good at, a specific way of growing Indian restaurants, maybe I want to franchise, maybe I want to, build up a chain, right? Now they can just take that playbook and then copy and paste it, and grow it that way.
Of all the categories that you mentioned, the finance, the operations, the one that stands out to me that I think a lot of people struggle with is HR, recruiting, hiring, keeping, training, just dealing with people and getting the workforce up to date and getting them productive. That's a pain point for so many of the small businesses that I work with, and they just don't know what to do. They don't know where to look. They don't know how to treat the people they hire. They don't know how to empower them. They don't know how to pick the good ones. So this ends up holding back a lot of businesses because they can't scale and they can't get larger and they can't achieve that initial goal of proving that the business can run without dependency on the founders. So I really want to zoom in on that issue of hiring and focus on how can up and coming businesses really nail the hiring process to prepare for M&A?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, the HR process is not unique for any business. It's all this. Every business has the same process, which is they have a role that needs to be fulfilled. They have to go and find people who are qualified to fulfill that role. But the truth is, a lot of small business owners don't know how to hire. So they're just guessing half the time. I would say more than half the time. And they have an interview and they say, oh, I like the way that person answered the questions. And, they seem like they're a really good fit. I know they'll be really good at the job, right? And I can't wait for people to hear this because I know this is going to resonate, right? How many small business owners out there hired somebody that you thought was going to be really good and they turned out to be terrible at the job? I bet you a lot of people listening to this will connect with that. That will resonate. I've done it because small business owners are having to be involved in so many different aspects of the business and learn to hire better and learn to look at a P&L, right? One or two successes make them feel like everything will be successful from there on. When you are growing a business, you're running a business and it starts to grow. What you don't realize is when you're running your business by yourself, there's less systems and processes needed because you know how to do everything. You're just doing it, right? But when you introduce one person, employee, into the mix or some other role into the mix, now I kind of mentioned this earlier, there's the challenges become exponential because you're not just doubling the capacity of the business, but now you're also having to deal with other stuff that you didn't even think would be problems. That person getting sick, or maybe they don't think the same way you do, or they have a different background, blah, blah, blah. They might see the world differently, right? And so you're having to navigate a slew of other challenges that you didn't have to navigate when you were just doing things yourself. Now, multiply that by 10, you get to 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people. These problems and challenges, they just keep growing and growing. So the only way to mitigate that is to develop a process and develop a system for people to do well in their jobs. And I'm talking about HR specifically. Like I started by saying, every company essentially follows the same process, right? In the bare bones. But there's going to be nuances depending on your type of business and your industry. You might need a sales and marketing, or you might need to fulfill somebody in a sales role that knows about, certain widgets, right? They might need to have a background in certain widgets. Maybe they need to have specialty in a certain software, whether it be Salesforce or, Constant Contact or one of those types of softwares, right? You need somebody that has XYZ skills. And what tends to happen when owners need to fulfill those roles is they don't think about the role itself. They think about the person coming to fulfill the role, right? They think, Adam's resume looks really great. I think he could do this job. And then we hire Adam, and then Adam's doing a pretty darn good job. But we're not building this role based on what the business needs. We're building this role based on how Adam performs, right? And then that perspective gets transferred over to other roles that the business needs to fulfill. Now it ends up being, we need to go find another Adam, not we need to find a specific salesperson with XYZ skills, right? And that's what I do. That's what I come in to help owners realize is we have to do things, activities in the business have to be repeatable, right? It doesn't matter if it's a sales role or a finance role or a whatever role. The way we source candidates for those roles has to be the same. There's going to be nuances depending on the position, right? And then the way this relates to leadership, for example, is the owner has to be able to have a vision. They have to have a vision for where those roles are going to grow or how they're going to progress. because people want to come in and they want to see some type of role progression. People want to get promoted. They want bonuses. They want to be recognized for their work. They want to be led by somebody who they feel confident in, that they have respect with, right? That they respect. And so we need systems and processes to deliver that to the staff. And that's not something that people realize is, people just say, oh, this is just what I do. But there's a system, there's a process. And so those things have to be teased out. And all of the 6 things that I mentioned, sales, marketing, finance, HR, operations, and leadership, they're all intertwined. You can't just do the operations really good and let the others fall by the wayside. You have to have a foundation, a strong foundation established in each of those 6 areas for the business to be able to operate without the reliance on the owner. And that's really the thing that generates value in the business, that creates value. That's valuable. If an owner, if a buyer comes and they look at your business and you have a great mechanism for delivering these things successfully and repeatably, then that instantly becomes more attractive.
So one thing I notice about this moment that we're in M&A, this moment in M&A history, is that it's driven by factors that are so different than the factors that were driving M&A in the past. Today, it seems like once the owner of any business reaches a certain age, they kind of have to transfer the business because there are so few families left that own businesses who can actually transfer those businesses to their kids. And as a result, we have this whole new industry of SMB M&A with people like us who have stepped in to try to serve entrepreneurs who want to exit their business without passing it on to their children. And we see this in farming, we see this in consumer products and retail, we see it in everything. So how has that dynamic changed from your perspective? What is unique about the current moment in M&A, and what makes business transfers so different or not different during this time?
Let's start with businesses that have an institutional knowledge requirement, right? I think of Ben Franklin. He at a printing shop when he was 10 years old, and so he learned how to, basically operate a printing business. And then when he was of age to take over the business, I think like before he was in his 20s, probably in between, is when in the colonial times would go off and start their own printing enterprise, right? They would also need to bring on an apprentice. And in order for the Ben Franklin or that proprietor's methodology to continue living on beyond them, they have to keep training apprentices. And so we create this system of institutional knowledge. And sometimes those methodologies get documented, sometimes they don't. And that became the basis for ownership transfer, right? Succession, essentially. That's what we call it. Family businesses. My granddad did it, my dad did it, I do it, my son's going to do it, right? It came from trades work, because that was business back in the day. Now with technology, you don't need that. You don't need to teach somebody. You don't need to have an apprentice under your wing. It's so easy for somebody to go out there now and start a business. 300-400 years ago, it wasn't that easy. If you didn't have knowledge, if you didn't know how to run a printing press, you couldn't just go and figure it out. People in the community would laugh at you, and then they probably wouldn't come to you because they realized, well, you don't know what you're doing. Why am I going to bring business to you? I'm going to go to Ben Franklin because he's been doing this for 40 years, right? And so there's that reputation that gets built up. And family businesses, I love family businesses because to me, that's such it's what built this country, right? And the sad thing is that's kind of going away. It's starting to go away a little bit because technology is causing a shift in the way businesses are built and in the way that they're transferred. And now with entities, large entities, conglomerates, who are going out and buying up a bunch of businesses that in some cases might be institutional knowledge businesses, essentially installing their blueprint in that business, all the experience from that proprietor disappears. So what I see is, I see a need for people to document and record what they're doing in their business. I do. As a sole proprietor myself, I write down what I did last week. I put processes, in a Word doc. And I do that because I don't want the knowledge to disappear, right? The only knowledge that gets transferred is whatever the apprentice absorbs, right? All the other stuff they don't absorb. You think Ben Franklin's apprentice did it the exact same way Ben Franklin did? Probably to 90% or 98%, but not 100%. There's going to be some stuff that he's like, oh, well, I kept telling Ben to do it like this and he didn't, but now I'm going to do it like this because it's more efficient. Right. And then so you start getting advancement that way. But that's innovation. Where I see this going, though, is to answer your question about how do I navigate that? How do I navigate that shift? The way I look at it is we have to go back to a time where we rely on individual people's experiences. Now with AI, it's so easy to have an armchair expert at your fingertips, essentially, right? That's what AI is. It's an armchair expert. It's an expert that, it doesn't have actual experience in the business. It just has experience. It has knowledge by observation, right? That's essentially what an armchair expert is. And in order for us to build valuable businesses, we have to rely on practical knowledge, practical application. And, there's an interesting shift too in this direction where a lot of the major MBA programs, Harvard, Wharton, MIT, they're teaching entrepreneurship through acquisition, ETA, right? 10, 15 years ago, it was like, hey, you got to go build a startup and then get it to unicorn status as soon as possible, right? Make it worth $1 billion. Over the past 2 or 3 years, they've actually been teaching people to go out and buy an existing business. And that's really exciting to me because now we're starting to see the continuation of the institutional knowledge. And I hope that those entrepreneurs have the wherewithal to document everything that previous owner learned and knew about the business. Something that's really exciting to me, and we're getting a little bit off topic here, but this is something that I'm really excited to see is I found a couple of like last week, I think, or a couple of weeks ago, I found this platform where you can essentially clone yourself with AI, right? You basically brain dump in it. And what's really cool about it is it trains itself based on audio or video that you've recorded. So, you and I are recording audio and video right now. The more we record, we can dump it into this AI model, and it's going to learn how to be us based on what we've talked about, what our gestures are like, etc. Right? And that's exciting to me because that is the introduction of technology as a steward to institutional knowledge. And I'm really excited to see where that goes because, in the past 20 years with technology allowing people to, or with technology lowering the barrier to entry into starting a business, now we're going to be able to make more and more unique businesses using institutional knowledge. Because if we can record that somewhere, if what I've learned and have experienced in my life can succeed me past my great grandkids, they can come back to me and say, hey, great grandpa, how, what do you think about this business idea? How would you run this? And I could share with them that information, even though I'm not alive. Sci-fi to think about, but that's where I see things going, and that's what really excites me, because over the past 20, 30 years, we've seen the decline of institutional knowledge businesses. My fear was, okay, what happens if a small business owner, a mom and pop shop, the proprietor dies, they pass away. Like, how is the family going to continue running that business without all the experience and knowledge from that person, right? Especially if it's not documented. I look at technology as a solution.
So a lot of people understand that they need to be recording information, they need to be documenting their systems and doing all that. They don't really know where to start. I think a lot of, written material, it's very formatted. It, follows a certain script that maybe a lot of people aren't comfortable with. Maybe they've worked at a company before, they've been handed like an employee handbook, and just the idea of like writing a book themselves or like writing documents, it feels overwhelming to them. So what do you think is the best like practical method for transferring knowledge and getting the team up to date and getting their skills up and getting a new buyer to look at the business and say, wow, the whole team knows what they're doing. I could add 10 more people. They would also know what they're doing.
The easiest thing for anybody to do is record what you're doing, whatever that means to you, whether you're creating a Word doc or you're, recording audio. But to be honest with you, it's really easy to record video now. And all you have to do is just start with one. Like, that's it. Just pick one thing you're doing this week and just record yourself doing it. And then pick another thing next week and record that. And then after that, do 2 in a week, and then 3 in a week, and 4 in a week. And then eventually you start recording every little thing that you're doing. Those recordings get better. And then if you have a team, especially, now instead of getting frustrated because you've got to get on a call with somebody and show them how to do something and blah, 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 you can just send them the video at their leisure, right? And the good thing about recording stuff is, I don't know about you, Adam, some people out there, but I watch stuff on 1.5, 1.7, 2x speed, right? Because sometimes I just want to get to the point, right? And because people learn and synthesize information differently, now you're introducing audio, video. If you have some commentary, right, that might add flavor or context to whatever you're doing. But instead of trying to guide somebody and say, okay, on the top left corner, you have to click on the menu bar and then it's going to drop down and blah, 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 right? Which, if you're not good at giving a technical tutorial, some people aren't good at explaining those minute steps. Just click on the menu on the top right. I don't see it there, right? I just see a bar with 3 dots. Some people won't know. And so what I urge people to do, especially owners who have teams, small teams, and whether they're remote or not, just record something you're doing, something that you do on a regular basis, or not do on a regular basis, but just get it recorded, because you have to start developing that. It's not something people think about, oh, I've got to document my systems and processes. It's not a one-time thing. It's not us doing this and then once it's done, it's done. It has to be done on a regular basis. That's the only way that it will get done, but also that's the only way that it's going to get better. Because guess what? The processes are going to change in 6 months, right? Or a year, or you hire somebody else and then you have to change the process because now that person has a new role that your company never had before. So that's the one thing I encourage people to do, and do it across all functions of your business, those 6 areas: marketing, HR, finance, operations, and leadership, right? How do you engage in those areas of the business? That's what we need to record.
So I think a lot of small business owners could probably handle the process of either writing stuff down or recording stuff, and maybe they might be a little bit uncomfortable with it at first, but eventually they would get it all out. The hard part, I think, is what comes next. What if the workers aren't necessarily digesting it? What if they have follow-up questions? And this brings me back to like school. You can show up to class, you can read the books, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're ready for the exam. You might have to go to office hours. You might have to buy some supplemental materials. Ultimately, we might hire someone for specific skills they have, but we don't really know what their learning style is. And if I'm someone who's buying the business, I don't only want to see that all the training materials exist. I want to take a look at the team and be like, is this team really sharp with the training materials? Do they really know how it's done? And I think that implementation of it, it's not something that's objective, and I think it's something that people struggle with a lot more than just getting the ideas out. So how do you implement? How do you teach? How do you turn the company into a classroom?
I think those are the nuances that add to the core value of the business, right? Going back to the Indian restaurant example, one does the rice really good, one does the curry really good. What you're talking about, Adam, is you're trying to share the family recipe, and there's so many nuances there, and there's so many things that might be hard to express, right? But that's what I mean is you've got to develop the muscle, right? You can't shy away from it because it's too much, or you don't know how to say it, or you can't figure out what the words are, or like, look, my grandma grew up in the countryside in Cambodia, right? And so when she taught me how to cook certain dishes, she would just be like, "Oh, just throw that in there," right? And to me, it's not that simple. What do you mean, just throw that in there? Like, how much do you want me to throw in? And then, like, at what point in the cooking should that be thrown in? Right? And this is like her trying to explain it to me over the phone. Like, oh, just go get chicken broth and then throw the whatever in and blah, blah. I'm like, okay. And so recording those things, getting those things sort of out of your system, and then sharing it with other people and getting feedback from them and saying, wait, Adam. So I watched the video where you interviewed X candidate, and I know you wanted to hire them, but like, tell me the things that you liked about them that made you feel that way, right? You've got to get that feedback from people. You can't build this stuff in a vacuum. And that's probably the most uncomfortable part of this exercise, is because you've got to record this thing, and then you have to go give it to somebody, and it's not perfect. It's not perfect by any means. But the thing is, it's never going to be perfect. It just needs to get done. It needs to get out there. And so record it, share it with somebody, ask them to ask you if they have any questions, right? Hey, here you go. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know what questions you have after you watch this. In this case particularly, you might want to say something specific like, watch this video, and by the end of the video, can you let me know if you would be able to, if you would be able to go hire somebody the same way I just hired this person, right? And maybe they have to go try it to know, right? Maybe they won't know. Well, let me go see. And then they go try it, and then it doesn't work. I'm like, well, I didn't really do that good. Okay, now let's go back and let's figure out why, right? It's like in sports when they record when the coaches rewatch the games. That's what I liken it to, because you have to go through and you have to pick it apart, and you have to continue to make it better each time. But you just got to start with one. That's the hard part.
So once we have our people trained, we have our training materials, we've taken the time to get them to understand it, we've adapted to their learning styles, they have a lot of institutional knowledge. The next step is, how do we make them productive? How do we act as leaders? How do we get them working? Do we just delegate to them? Do we give them specific tasks? Do we give them a title? How do we get someone just off and running? And I think what a lot of entrepreneurs deal with is employees who are not go-getters. They're not active, they're just passive. They just wait to be told what to do. They do the bare minimum. They go back to their desk and they wait for the next thing. And for that reason, most of them are destined to be forever W-2s. And it's only a minority of the population that really gets after it. So once we've given all of our knowledge to our people, how do we get them to stand up and just get after it so that we can really remove ourselves? Because it's one thing to teach, and it's one thing to be surrounded by people who know what you know, but it's another thing to actually step away and stop doing things. What happens next when you hand over not just the knowledge, but also the keys and the authority itself?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, because I did want to mention it as almost a cornerstone to reducing owner dependency, right? You have to be able to what I call transfer authority. People talk about delegating, and you see the gurus out there saying, you want to get out of the day-to-day, you need to delegate more. They couldn't be more wrong, right? You can't delegate. You shouldn't delegate. Delegate implies that you are giving a list of tasks to somebody to go do. And when they come back, they're going to report back to you to let you know that it's done. And then they're going to wait for more tasks. That absolves them from the responsibility, the accountability, and the consequences of what you actually need them to go do. Instead, what I urge owners to do, and I tell all my clients this, is you have to transfer authority. What does that mean? That means they are fully responsible and accountable for all the consequences that results from the outcome. If I say, hey, Adam, I need you to go win this case. Just go do it. There's a couple of things you should probably keep in mind, but just go win this case for us, right? Legal case, just to be clear. And you go out there, you're like, okay, I'm going to go win it. I'm going to go do whatever I need to do to win it. But, you mentioned 2 or 3 things. I'm going to keep those in mind when I go do that, right? That's a totally different conversation than saying, Adam, I need you to show up to court on Monday, and I need you to sit in the proceedings. And when it's time to give the opening statement, I need you to give the opening statement. And then I need you to cross-examine the witness, right? You're not thinking about winning the case now. Now you're thinking about all the minute steps that you need to take to get to court on Monday. You have to wake up on time. You have to put your suit on. You have to get in the car and drive to the courthouse. You have to find parking, blah, 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 right? Now you're getting tripped up on all the steps that you need to do in order to get to the outcome of winning the case. And now you're less focused on winning the case. You're just focused on getting to court. But if I tell you, go win the case, and I just let you do that however you need to, now that's what you're going to go do. And we might have a process for that already, right? We might say, hey, so a case like this, here's how it typically shakes out. And, I'd like you to follow that process as much as possible. Don't badger the witness. Don't upset the opposing counsel. At the end of the day, we just want to win. We want to win the case for the client. Now you look at it differently, right? Now you aren't focused so much on showing up to court. Now you're focused on, okay, what do I need to do in order for me to win this legal case? Those add to your success, or those contribute to your success. So when we talk about owners letting go, I tell all my clients, you have to focus on the outcome, not the activities. Don't focus on what they're doing. Focus on what you want them to achieve. And if you do that and you can allow them the autonomy to go achieve that, then they're going to come back to you with a success. And even if they don't, even if they come back to you with a failure, they're going to be more comfortable coming back to you and saying, hey, I really tried this, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I might need your help, right? I don't know if I can go win the case. Can you come to court with me on that day? Can you be on my bench? And now we have 2 people who are focused on the win, right? As opposed to saying, hey, Chris, I don't know. I'm at the courthouse, but the parking garage is closed and I can't park my car. And, can you, can you go to court for the garage? Now it's a totally different focus, right? And so what ends up happening, especially with small businesses and with owners who are always involved in the day-to-day, is they focus more on the activities because they're concerned about people doing the activities the way that they would do it rather than getting the outcome. And that's the biggest difference in delegation versus transfer of authority. And that's the thing that we need to focus on.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris. I hope everybody learned something. And I hope that even if you're at the beginning stages of your business and you might not be approaching an exit, you still focus on those 6 fundamentals that Chris outlined. And you should try to start doing that as soon as possible. I know I am in my business, but I think it's the kind of thing that pays dividends much later. And even if you end up replacing everything that you did, you end up redoing all your videos, replacing all your staff, it's still going to move you forward and you're going to get better at those core skills, which, as we discussed, really comes down to institutional knowledge creation and passing that knowledge on to people and getting used to empowering those people so that ultimately you can prove to your buyer that once they take over the business and you're gone, the business is still going to make money. So thank you so much, Chris. And to everyone listening, we'll be back next week with another solo episode.